Chapter 20. The Ember and the Wall. For 4 years the coal had grown, slowly but without fail, and Ethan had come to trust the growth the way you trust the sunrise. Then, in the winter of his 7th year, it stopped. He noticed it the way he noticed all his cultivation, by the feel and the count, the only instruments he had. For years each season had brought a measurable thickening, the thread to a strand, the strand to an ember, the ember to a steady coal, the holding from 3 breaths to a dozen to as long as he chose. He had assumed, without quite examining the assumption, that the growth would simply continue, that if he listened inward long enough, patiently enough, the coal would keep deepening forever, all the way up the unseen ladder toward the burning-eyed strength of the tide. It did not. The coal reached a certain size, a certain density, a certain steady warmth at the center of his chest, and there it sat and would not pass. He pushed. Of course he pushed. He went stiller than he had ever gone, listened deeper, held longer, poured every patient night into the work the way he had poured the years before. The coal answered all of it with the same maddening constancy, present, steady, full, and unmoving. Whatever he did, it did not grow. He had hit a wall, the first real wall of his cultivation, and no amount of the patience that had carried him this far would push him through it. The frustration was a new thing, and it frightened him a little how sharp it was. He had been patient for years. Patience was the bedrock of his whole second life. He had outlasted toddlerhood and Aldridge and the slow, blind years of self-teaching by simply refusing to stop. But patience assumes that effort, continued, eventually pays, and the wall did not pay. Night after night he gave it everything and it gave him nothing back, and the cold river in him, which did not like problems it could not solve, began to churn. He was racing a clock. Every night the coal did not grow was a night spent against a 2027 that did not pause for walls. He could not afford to be stalled. And he was stalled completely, with no idea why. So he stopped pushing finally, because pushing was failing, and he did the thing he should have done first, the thing the second life had taught him to do with every problem too big to force. He went still and stopped trying to break the wall and instead tried to understand it. He listened inward differently, not reaching for growth, but examining what was there, the way a man runs his hands over a thing in the dark to learn its shape. And slowly, over patient nights, the shape of the wall came clear. The coal was not failing to grow. It was full. He had spent 4 years gathering ether into the center of his chest and holding it there, packing it denser and denser into the one place he knew how to hold it, and he had filled that place to its limit. The vessel was full. You could not pour more into a full cup. The cup simply overflowed, which was exactly what happened every time he pushed, the gathered ether spilling uselessly back out along the half-formed channels he had blindly scratched open. The problem was not the gathering. He was good at the gathering. The problem was that he had nowhere left to put what he gathered. And he understood, feeling along the shape of it in the dark, what the next step had to be, even if he did not have the words for it. He needed to forge a true channel. Not the shallow scratches he had carved by accident over the years, but a real, deep, deliberate path for the ether to flow through and beyond the full vessel of his chest, out into the body, through the meridians, into a larger circulation that could hold and refine far more than one packed coal ever could. He could feel where such a channel wanted to go. He could feel the body's own faint readiness for it. What he could not do was make it. Every time he tried to force the ether down that path, it tore at him, raw and wrong, like water forced through unbroken ground, and the pain of it stopped him every time before any channel formed. There was a way through. He was sure of it. But the way through was not a thing he could invent by listening harder in the dark. It was a technique, a method, a knowing, the kind of thing that in a real tradition a master would hand a student, that had been worked out and refined over generations by people who had walked this road before. And Ethan had no master, no tradition, no people who had walked this road. He had only himself, a child alone in the dark, trying to forge a path through his own body that he did not know how to forge. He lay awake a long time that night, facing the new shape of his situation, and it was a humbling one. For 4 years he had needed nothing but patience and stillness, and they had carried him, and he had let himself believe, quietly, that they could carry him all the way, that the lonely self-taught road would be enough, that he could climb the whole unseen ladder alone in the dark on grit and time. The wall ended that belief. He had reached the limit of what a man could teach himself with no map, and the limit had come far earlier than he'd hoped. To go further, to forge the channel, to pass from this first realm into whatever lay above it, to gather the strength he would need against the tide, he needed something he did not have and could not make. He needed knowledge, a method, or the person who held one. It was a strange and unwelcome conclusion for a man whose entire strategy had been built on needing no one, on hiding, on the lonely fortress of the buried self. The wall told him coldly that the fortress had a ceiling, that somewhere out in the world, in the hidden places he knew the awakened occupied, there were people who knew how to do the thing he could not, and that sooner or later, if he wanted to climb, he was going to have to find them. And finding them meant risk. It meant stepping, however carefully, out of the perfect invisibility he had spent his whole second life building. It meant letting the world of power know, even a little, that Ethan Cole existed. Not yet. He was 7. He had no idea where to look, and the wet road of 1999 stood between him and any longer journey, and the second rule still ruled him. But the wall was there now, real and immovable, and behind it stood the certainty that the lonely road would not be lonely forever, that one day, to grow strong enough to keep his ledger, Ethan would have to do the most dangerous thing of all. He would have to let someone in. He set the thought beside the others, cold and patient, and turned back to the only work the wall still allowed him, not growing the coal now, but learning, night by night, the exact shape of the path he could not yet forge, so that when the method finally came from wherever it came, he would be ready to walk it the very first night.